the way of the cross. Mark, Matthew, and Luke are agreed on the name of the man who helped Jesus carry the cross. Now, it's interesting, but most of the research that's been done on crucifixion would say that probably the Romans on this mount called Golgotha, the skull, and that was an outcropping of rock in a quarry. And there was a road leading into town. But it was a perfect display place for capital punishment. Because, let's face it, the only capital punishment that you would think could possibly be a deterrent, certainly injection I don't think is a real deterrent. It is so sanitized. Is, do it publicly, do it brutally, do it bloody, and leave the bodies there for the birds to pick on. And that'll show you, don't be trying that same thing. Of course, that really didn't work back then. People still were trying that same thing. What? Why do we think it works now? Anyway, this was an outcropping of rock, apparently, with somewhat steep sides, but not that high. And they would probably have several vertical stakes on it. Because crucifixion tended to be, the vertical piece was there, and because, it's pretty hard to try to pick up a cross as we've depicted it in art and put it into a hole with a man's body nailed to it. It makes a lot more sense to have the vertical piece there, nail him to a cross piece, and then lift that up and plop it down on a V-shaped notch at the top of the vertical piece. So that would be a T-shaped cross, with then maybe a hole in the horizontal piece to put a sign telling them what the punishment was, what the crime was. So Jesus would have been carrying the cross this way, having it strapped to his arms, tied to his arms. Well, one of the interesting things, of course, is, especially if you're in a weakened condition, as he would have been, you trip and fall, and nothing is going to break your fall. And, of course, the crossbar is going to come right down on your upper back there. So whether that happened 3 times or not, that's sort of a later extra-biblical tradition. But it certainly did seem that he was in need of help. And so all of the first 3 Gospels all say that it came upon a man named Simon from Cyrene and compelled him to carry the cross. Now, whether they would have actually strapped him to the cross that way or just said, here's a cross beam, you carry it. I suspect because he wasn't guilty of anything, they wouldn't do that additional brutality. But it seems that Jesus did not have to carry his own cross, except in John. John wants to make sure that Jesus is the one who's doing it all. So John emphasizes carrying the cross by himself. Okay, Luke, good old Luke. Luke is going to have Jesus' compassion and healing love come out no matter what. So Luke is not content with just having Jesus carrying his cross, but some things have to happen there while he is carrying the cross. And there were some women who were professional mourners somebody's being executed. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, well, let's get a group to go out there, and don't forget your hankies, and, we'll weep and wail and carry on. And Jesus is very kind to them. And then the two others, criminals, by the way, where is Veronica? She isn't. Enough said. So that's part of later tradition. So then we get to the crucifixion.
I never understood this part when he talks to the women, and they will begin to say, to the mountains fall on us, and to the hills cover us. For if they do this, and when the wood is green, what will happen when it's dry?
Basically what he is saying there, that's the question was that she didn't quite get, that the last part of that there. They will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills cover us. Basically what he is saying, and some people see this as a prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem, which by the time Luke was writing it down had already happened. So he may be alluding to what people had already experienced, and that destruction was a terrible thing. When an invading army wants to come in and destroy everything and everybody, they do a good job of that. And that always gets portrayed in terms like this. Okay, so they crucify him with the two thieves, one on either side. And that's attested to in almost the same way in every gospel. All four gospels. Now, what are Jesus' last words? Mark and Matthew have him saying only one thing. And that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And an important point for us is that seems so very strong as a cry of despair. And yet, those were the first words of Psalm 22. How many of you picked up my mistake in the bulletin last week? Regarding, I said Psalm 51. But it's Psalm 52, or 22. So I corrected it this coming week. But notice, my God, why have you forsaken me? Is the beginning of a very lengthy psalm there that does allude to things that were happening to Jesus at that time. You could call it a prophecy, but as I say, I think it's more in its prophetic meaning is that it certainly pre-echoes it. But the interesting thing is, if that psalm was on Jesus' lips, what was in his heart was that this psalm, if you read it carefully, goes from a cry of despair and hopelessness to a petition for help, to a confidence that God not only is going to help him, but that God is going to enable him to proclaim to generations yet unborn the saving work that God has done. And that's the way it ends. So,
He did not hide his face from me, but heard when I cried to him.
Yes.